The housekeeper's hand trembled as she reached for Orenna's dinner plate, and that small quaver told Kendrick everything he needed to know about how the evening would unfold. His mother sat at the head of the long oak table, spine straight as the iron poker beside the hearth, her silver hair pinned so tightly it seemed to pull her features into a permanent expression of displeasure. She had not looked at Orenna once since they had arrived, though her gaze had swept over Kendrick with the same assessing coldness she might give to livestock at market. The dining room of Zerwell Manor had been built by his grandfather to impress visiting merchants and lesser lords, all dark paneling and mullioned windows that caught the last orange light of sunset. Now it felt like a courtroom. "Mother, this is Orenna Lorne," Kendrick said. His voice carried the same flat tone he used when discussing grain yields or fence repairs. "We will be married in the spring." His mother's fingers tightened on her wine glass. She still did not look at Orenna. "How pleasant," she said, and the words fell like stones into still water. Orenna stood beside him in the simple gray wool dress they had purchased in Millfield 3 days prior. She had wanted to make a good impression. Her green hands were folded at her waist, and Kendrick could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her small tusks pressed against her lower lip. She was trying to make herself smaller, less threatening. It made something hot and angry coil in his chest. "Please sit," his mother said, gesturing vaguely toward the far end of the table, where 3 chairs had been arranged below the salt cellar. The positioning was deliberate. Below the salt meant servant, means guest of no consequence. The housekeeper, Mrs. Faraway, stood frozen with the dinner plate still in her hands. She had known Kendrick since he was a boy in short pants, had bandaged his scraped knees and scolded him for tracking mud through the entry hall. Now she looked at him with something like pity. "Sit that creature below the salt," his mother said, and now she did look at Orenna, her pale blue eyes cold as midwinter ice. "I will not have my late husband's table dishonored." Kendrick did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice. But when he moved, every person in that room went silent. He walked around the table with measured steps, boot heels striking the floorboards with the steady rhythm of a funeral drum. He stopped beside the chair at the head of the table, his father's chair, the place his mother had occupied since the old man's death 5 years past. "Mother," he said, "move." Lady Zerwell's face went white, then red. "You forget yourself, I forget nothing." He pulled the chair back. The scrape of wood on wood seemed loud as a thunderclap. "Orenna will sit here." His mother's hands shook with rage. "That is your father's chair. Your father who built this estate from wilderness, who carried the Zerwell name with honor, and you would seat a green-skinned monster where he once sat. Father is dead. This is my house now. This house is held in trust, as you well know. The land, the herds, the tenant farms, all of it remains in my control until I deem you fit to inherit, and I will never deem you fit if you persist in this madness." Kendrick turned his head slightly, catching Orenna's eye. She looked stricken, her green skin gone pale, her dark eyes wide. He could see her calculating, understanding that this moment was about more than just a seat at dinner. This was about inheritance, about legacy, about the 800 acres of prime grazing land and timber forest that had belonged to the Zerwell family for 4 generations. "Orenna," he said, "come here." She moved toward him slowly, as though walking to the gallows. When she reached his side, he took her hand. Her palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid. He guided her to the chair and held it while she sat, still staring at him with those wide, frightened eyes. His mother rose, her chair scraping back so violently it nearly toppled. "You will lose everything," she said, her voice shaking. "Everything your father worked for, everything our family has built. For what? For something you found in the border territories playing soldier and savage. I found someone I intend to marry, Kendrick said. Now we will have dinner, or you may leave your own table. For a long moment, his mother simply stared at him. He could see the calculation behind her eyes, the same shrewd intelligence that had kept the estate profitable through 2 bad winters and a grain blight. She knew he was serious. She knew he would not bend. Finally, with movements sharp as breaking glass, she sat in the chair at Orenna's right hand, the place where the hostess would normally sit. Kendrick took the seat on Orenna's left. The rest of the table remained empty, a wasteland of polished wood and unlit candles. Mrs. Faraway served the soup. They ate in silence so thick it seemed to muffle even the clink of silver on porcelain. Kendrick watched Orenna from the corner of his eye. She held her spoon with careful precision, her movements small and precise. She barely touched the food. His mother ate mechanically, each motion crisp and controlled, and did not look up from her bowl. The fish course came and went. Then the roasted venison, the root vegetables glazed with honey, the bread still warm from the oven. Mrs. Faraway served and cleared with increasing haste, as though eager to escape the oppressive quiet. The sun finished setting, and the housekeeper lit the candles, casting the room in flickering gold and shadow. Finally, as the dessert plates were being cleared, his mother set down her fork and looked directly at Orenna for the first time since that initial cutting glance. "Tell me," she said, her voice deceptively mild. "What exactly do you bring to this union? Dowry, family connections, land?" Orenna's jaw tightened. "No, my lady, I have nothing of material value." How refreshing! Honesty from a greenskin. Most of your kind would at least attempt to lie convincingly. "Mother," Kendrick said, the word carried a warning. "I am merely attempting to understand what has possessed my only son to throw away his birthright." His mother turned her cold gaze on him. "You understand what this means, do you not? If you marry this creature, I will not sign over the trust. You will have no land, no income, no position. The Zerwell name will die with me, and you will be a landless farmer with a monster for a wife. I understand perfectly. Do you?" She leaned forward, and for the first time he saw something beyond anger in her face, something that might have been fear. "Do you truly?" "This is not some romantic fancy, Kendrick. This is your life. This is your family's legacy. 4 generations have worked this land, have built this house stone by stone, and you would cast it all aside for something you cannot even bring home without causing scandal." "I brought her home," Kendrick said quietly. "You are the one making scandal of it." His mother laughed, a bitter sound. "The whole county is already talking. Lady Zerwell's son who fought at the border brought home a trophy from the war, an orc woman, as though she were some kind of souvenir." "I was never at the border," Kendrick said. "I met Orenna at the livestock market in Tanner's Ford. She was working the cattle pens. That is all." "How romantic." His mother rose from the table. "You have until the new year to reconsider this madness. After that, the trust will be sealed in my name alone, and you will inherit nothing. I hope she is worth it." She left the dining room with her head high, her skirts rustling like dry leaves. They listened to her footsteps recede up the stairs, then the distant sound of a door closing with finality. Orenna put her face in her hands. Kendrick reached over and gently pulled her hands away. Her eyes were bright with tears she refused to shed. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I should not have come. I should have known this would happen. You have nothing to apologize for. You will lose everything because of me, everything your family built. I cannot let you do that. You are not letting me do anything. I am making my own choice." She pulled her hands from his and stood, pacing to the window. Outside, the estate stretched into darkness, fields and pastures and timber stands that represented more wealth than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. "How can you be so calm?" she asked. "You are about to lose all of this. It is only land. It is not only land." She turned to face him, and now her voice carried an edge. "It is your birthright, your heritage. Your father built this for you. My father built this for himself. I am building something different." "What? A life of poverty? Of struggling to put food on the table while your neighbors whisper about the man who married a monster?" Kendrick stood and crossed to her. He was not a tall man, just shy of 6 feet, and Orenna stood only a few inches shorter. They were nearly eye to eye. "I met you in Tanner's Ford 8 months ago," he said. "You were managing a cattle drive of 60 head alone because the farmer who hired you could not afford a full crew. The cattle were sick with something, half-starved, mean as serpents. By the time you got them to market, every single animal had put on weight, the sickness was gone, and they sold for twice what anyone expected. Do you remember what you did with the bonus pay the farmer gave you?" She looked away. "That is not relevant. You sent it to your sister in the Northern Territories because her husband had been injured in a logging accident. You kept barely enough to eat." He caught her chin gently, turning her face back toward him. "You are the most competent person I have ever met. I trust you more than I trust anyone else alive. That is why I want to marry you. Not as a statement, not as rebellion, but because I cannot imagine living my life with anyone else." A tear finally escaped, tracking down her green cheek. "Your mother is right, though. I will ruin you. Or you will be the making of me. I would rather take that chance than live a safe, respectable life without you." She closed her eyes. "We should sleep on this, talk in the morning." "All right." But he could see it in the set of her shoulders, the way she would not quite meet his gaze. She was already planning to leave. Mrs. Faraway showed them to separate guest rooms on opposite ends of the second floor. Kendrick's childhood room had been kept exactly as he left it when he departed for the border 8 years ago, down to the dusty collection of carved wooden horses on the shelf above the bed. Orenna's room was the blue guest chamber, pretty and impersonal. He did not bother trying to sleep. Instead, he sat on the edge of his narrow bed and stared at the darkness outside his window, thinking about inheritance and pride, and the look on his mother's face when she had called Orenna a creature. His father had been a hard man, fair but distant. He had taught Kendrick about crop rotation and breeding stock, about keeping accounts and managing tenants. He had taught him that a Zerwell's word was law on Zerwell land, and that responsibility and authority were 2 sides of the same iron coin. But he had never taught Kendrick what to do when responsibility and love pulled in opposite directions. When his father died, Kendrick had been at the southern border, 3 weeks' ride away. By the time he received word and made the journey home, the old man was already buried in the family plot beside the orchard. His mother had managed everything alone, had kept the estate running without missing a step. He had stayed for 2 months, long enough to help with the spring planting, and then he had left again. He could not bear being in the house, surrounded by his father's absence and his mother's cold competence. He had wandered for 3 years after that, hiring out as a laborer on farms and ranches across the frontier territories. Hard work that left him too tired to think, too tired to feel the weight of expectation that had pressed on him his entire life. And then he had met Orenna. She had been standing in the middle of a cattle pen, calmly facing down a bull that had gone mean from illness and poor handling. The other drovers had scattered to the fence rails, but Orenna had simply stood there, talking in a low, steady voice, until the bull's rage bled away to confusion, then exhaustion. She had walked that animal to a separate pen like a dog on a lead. Kendrick had hired on with the same drive heading north, and over the course of 3 weeks, he had watched her work. She was tireless, patient with the animals and sharp with the lazy drovers who tried to slack off. She never complained, never made excuses. When the cook's wagon broke an axle, she had helped repair it. When they lost 2 steers in a river crossing, she had tracked them for 6 miles through rough country and brought them back. He had fallen in love the way a man fell into a well, suddenly and completely. By the time they reached the northern markets, he knew he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. The courtship had been awkward. He was not good with words, and she was wary of him at first, assuming he wanted something dishonorable. It had taken weeks of patient conversation, of shared meals at roadside taverns, of working side by side on various farms and ranches, before she began to trust that his intentions were genuine. When he finally asked her to marry him, she had stared at him in disbelief. "You cannot be serious." "I am serious. I am an orc. You are a human landowner's son. Your family will disown you, possibly. Definitely." She had paced away from him, her green hands clenched into fists. "You do not know what you are asking. The prejudice, the hatred. I have lived with it my entire life, but you have not. It will crush you. Then we will bear it together." "You are a fool," she had said, but she was smiling when she said it, and she had said yes. Now, sitting in his childhood bedroom with Dawn still hours away, Kendrick wondered if she had been right, if he was a fool to think love could be enough in the face of everything else. His mother controlled the estate trust absolutely. If she refused to sign it over, he would have nothing. He could probably find work as a farm manager or overseer somewhere, but those positions were hard to come by and poorly paid compared to what the Zerwell lands generated. And Orenna was right that people would talk, would judge, would make their lives harder than they needed to be. But the alternative was to let her go, to live the life his mother wanted for him, to marry some suitable woman from a respectable family and produce heirs to carry on the Zerwell name. And he could not do that. The thought of it made him feel hollow. He must have dozed eventually, because he woke to gray pre-dawn light and the sound of someone moving quietly in the hallway. He was at his door in 3 strides, pulling it open just in time to see Orenna descending the stairs with her small traveling pack over her shoulder. "Where are you going?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. She froze, her hand on the banister. For a moment he thought she might lie, then her shoulders slumped. "I cannot let you do this," she said quietly. "I cannot let you give up everything for me. So you were going to leave without saying goodbye." "I thought it would be easier." "For whom?" She turned to face him, and in the thin dawn light she looked exhausted. "For both of us. If I stay, you will keep fighting for something that cannot work. Your mother will never accept me and you will lose your birthright. But if I leave now, you can mend fences with her. You can still inherit what is rightfully yours." "I do not want it. Not like that." "You say that now, but in 10 years, when we are struggling to make ends meet, when you watch other men prosper while you scrape by, you will resent me. You will wish you had made a different choice." Kendrick came down the stairs slowly. "You do not have much faith in me." "I have too much faith in you. That is the problem." Her voice cracked. "You are a good man, Kendrick. You deserve better than a life of hardship because you fell in love with the wrong person. You are not the wrong person. I am an orc. In your mother's eyes, in the eyes of your society, that makes me wrong by definition." He stopped 2 steps above her, so they were at eye level. "What do you want, Orenna? If my mother and the estate and all of it did not exist, what would you want?" She closed her eyes. "That is not a fair question. Answer it anyway." "I would want to marry you. I would want to build a life with you. I would want to wake up beside you every morning and work beside you every day and fall asleep in your arms every night." The words came out in a rush, as though she could not hold them back any longer. "I would want all of it, everything we talked about. But that is a fantasy, and I will not let you destroy yourself chasing fantasies. What if it is not a fantasy? What if we can make it work? How? Tell me how, and I will stay." He could not answer that. He had no plan, no clever solution. All he had was stubborn determination, and the bone-deep certainty that letting her walk away would be the greatest mistake of his life. Before he could find words, his mother's voice cut through the dim hallway. "Let her go, Kendrick." They both turned. Lady Zerwell stood at the top of the stairs in her dressing gown, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. She looked older in the gray light and very tired. "If she wishes to leave, let her," his mother continued. "It will save us all a great deal of pain." "No," Kendrick said. "You cannot keep someone who does not want to stay. She wants to stay. She is leaving because she thinks it is best for me. That is different." His mother descended the stairs with careful dignity. When she reached the landing, she looked at Orenna with an expression Kendrick could not quite read. "You truly intend to leave, even though he has made his choice clear?" Orenna lifted her chin. "I will not be the reason he loses everything. He deserves better than that." "How noble." His mother's voice dripped with scorn. "And you think abandoning him will hurt less than staying? How foolish. If you leave now, he will follow you. He will throw away his inheritance chasing after you, and you will both end up with nothing. At least if you stay, there is a chance I might be persuaded." "You made your position quite clear last night," Orenna said. "I made my feelings clear. My position is more complicated." Lady Zerwell moved past them both, walking toward the dining room. "Come. We will have breakfast and discuss this like rational adults instead of children running away in the night." Kendrick and Orenna exchanged glances. He could see the uncertainty in her face, the fear of hoping. Slowly, they followed his mother into the dining room. Mrs. Faraway was already laying out the morning meal: bread and cheese and cold ham, boiled eggs and porridge. She gave Kendrick a meaningful look as she set down the teapot, but said nothing. His mother took the same seat she had occupied the previous night, to the right of the head of the table. She gestured at the other chairs. "Sit." They sat. Orenna chose a chair midway down the table, but Kendrick guided her back to the head, his father's place. She gave him a warning look, but he ignored it. If they were going to have this conversation, they would have it on equal footing. His mother poured tea with steady hands. "The estate trust was established by my father-in-law 30 years ago. It stipulates that control of the land passes to the eldest son when he reaches the age of 25 or when he marries, whichever comes first. However, if the current trustee deems the heir unfit to manage the property, control can be withheld indefinitely." "I know the terms," Kendrick said. "Then you know that I have complete discretion in this matter. The law is on my side." She sipped her tea. "However, I am not an unreasonable woman. I am willing to negotiate." Orenna's hands tightened on her teacup. "What do you want?" "Honesty to start. You said last night that you bring nothing to this union. Is that true?" "No family, no skills, no prospects. I have skills. I am good with livestock, particularly cattle. I can manage a herd, treat common illnesses, assist with difficult births. I can break and train horses. I can keep accounts and manage workers." "And your family?" "My father died when I was young. My mother remarried and moved to the Northern Territories. I have 2 sisters, both married with families of their own." Orenna met his mother's gaze steadily. "We are not wealthy, but we are not savages. My eldest sister is a midwife. My younger sister manages a trading post with her husband. We work for our living, same as anyone." "Yet you were working cattle pens alone." "I go where the work is. Droving pays well if you can handle the animals, and I can." Lady Zerwell set down her teacup. The Zerwell estate runs primarily on sheep and timber. We have 200 breeding ewes, 50 head of cattle, and 3 timber crews working the northern forest. We also hold tenant contracts with 8 farming families. It is a substantial operation. I am sure it is. The sheep have been dying. The words came out flat, almost emotionless. We lost 30 ewes in the last 2 months. The lambs are sickly. The wool harvest was half what it should have been. If the decline continues, we will lose everything. Kendrick straightened. You never told me the herd was in trouble. You were not here. And when you finally did come home, you brought her. His mother gestured at Orenna. I have had other concerns. What does the livestock manager say? Harrow is baffled. He thinks it might be the grazing or the water or some sickness he has never seen before. He has tried separating the sick animals, changing their feed, bringing in a veterinary from Millfield. Nothing works. Orenna leaned forward. What are the symptoms? Lethargy, weight loss, difficulty breathing. Some of them develop sores on their skin. They simply waste away over the course of weeks until they are too weak to stand. And the cattle, are they affected? No, only the sheep. Orenna sat back, her brow furrowed in thought. Kendrick watched her think, saw the quick intelligence moving behind her eyes. It sounds like Meyer sickness, she said finally. We saw it in the border territories a few years ago. It is caused by parasites in wet grazing areas, near bogs or slow-moving streams. The sheep ingest the parasites while grazing, and they burrow into the lungs and other organs. Cattle can get it too, but they are more resistant. Harrow never mentioned parasites, Lady Zerwell said. Most people do not recognize it. The symptoms mimic other diseases, and unless you have seen it before, you would not know what to look for. Orenna stood, pacing to the window. Where are your sheep grazing? The south pastures, primarily. There is a creek running through the lower fields. That would be consistent with Meyer sickness. The parasites breed in slow water. If your sheep have been grazing near the creek, they are ingesting contaminated water and vegetation. Can it be treated? Kendrick asked. Yes, but it takes time and effort. The sheep need to be moved to clean pasture immediately, far from any standing water. The infected animals need to be treated with a decoction of bitter root and feverfew, twice daily for at least a month. The old grazing areas need to be drained and left fallow for a full year to kill off the parasites. Lady Zerwell stood slowly. If you are wrong, we will lose even more animals. If I am right and you do nothing, you will lose them all. And if you are right, what then? Orenna turned to face her. Then your sheep recover and your wool harvest returns to normal, and you will have lost nothing by listening to me, except my pride. His mother's voice was soft. Except the satisfaction of maintaining my standards. Is that really more important than your sheep? Orenna asked. More important than your son's happiness. You do not understand what you are asking me to give up. This is not simply about accepting you as a daughter-in-law. If I allow this marriage, I am setting a precedent. I am telling the entire county that the Zerwell family has fallen so low that we intermarry with orcs. My friends will cut me. My allies will distance themselves. The respect my husband spent his life building will evaporate. Or, Kendrick said quietly, you could be the woman who saw past prejudice to recognize competence. The woman who saved her estate by listening to wisdom others would have dismissed. That is a legacy worth having. His mother looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Orenna. Very well, she said. You will have your chance to prove yourself. If you can cure the herd, I will consider your suit. But if you fail, you will leave this house and never contact my son again. Do we have an agreement? Orenna glanced at Kendrick. He could see the fear in her eyes, but also the determination. We have an agreement. Then I suggest you begin immediately. Harrow will be in the south pastures at first light. I will send word that he is to cooperate fully." Lady Zerwell moved toward the door, then paused. "And Orenna, do not make me regret this." "I will not, my lady." His mother left without another word. They heard her footsteps ascending the stairs, then the distant sound of a door closing. Kendrick let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Well, that could have gone worse. Orenna sank into her chair. "She is testing me. If I fail, she wins. If I succeed, she has to accept me, but she will resent me for it. Either way, I lose." "You do not lose. We get a chance. That is more than we had an hour ago." "A chance to save a herd I have never seen from a disease I am only reasonably certain I have diagnosed correctly." She rubbed her face. "No pressure. You said you have seen this before." "I have, but every case is different. If I am wrong about the diagnosis, or if the infection is too advanced, or if there is some other complicating factor, those sheep will die and your mother will blame me, justifiably." Kendrick pulled his chair closer to hers. "Do you believe you can do this?" She met his eyes. "I think so. But I will need help. Good help, people who will take direction without arguing, and I will need supplies, herbs, and medicine that may be difficult to source. This will not be quick or easy. We have a month before the new year. That is the deadline my mother set. Can it be done in that time? If the sheep respond to treatment, possibly, but there are no guarantees. There never are." He took her hand. "But I trust you, and I will help however I can." She squeezed his fingers. "You really are a fool, you know that. You have mentioned it." They shared a tired smile, and for a moment the weight of the situation lifted. Then Orenna stood, squaring her shoulders. "All right. Let us go see these sheep. The sooner we start, the better." The south pastures sprawled across rolling hills, divided by the creek Lady Zerwell had mentioned. The water moved sluggishly, pooling in places where the banks had eroded, creating the exact conditions mire parasites favored. Kendrick could see the problem the moment they crested the rise. The lower fields were a morass of mud and standing water, and the sheep grazing there looked thin and listless. Harrow was a stocky man in his 40s with the weathered face of someone who had spent his life outdoors. He stood beside a fence post, arms crossed, watching them approach with undisguised hostility. "You the orc woman Lady Zerwell sent?" he asked as they drew near. "I am Orenna Lorne. This is Kendrick Zerwell. I know who he is." Harrow spat into the grass. "Heard you think you can cure my sheep." "I think I might know what is killing them. Whether I can cure them depends on how far the disease has progressed. Lady Zerwell says I am to cooperate, so I will. But I have been managing these herds for 15 years, and I have never seen anything like this sickness. I am not sure some wandering cattle drover is going to succeed where I have failed." "I understand your skepticism," Orenna said calmly, "but if we are going to save these animals, we need to work together. Can you show me the sick ones?" Harrow led them into the pasture. The sheep scattered at their approach, but several animals barely moved, their breathing labored and rapid. Orenna knelt beside one, running her hands over its fleece, checking its eyes and gums, examining the sores on its skin. "This is mire sickness," she said after a few minutes. "I am almost certain. Never heard of it. It is not common this far south, but the conditions are right. That creek is the source." She pointed to the slow-moving water. "The parasites breed there and the sheep ingest them while grazing or drinking. So what do we do? First, we move every animal off this pasture immediately. They need to be on clean ground, away from any water source that might be contaminated. The northern fields would be best." Harrow frowned. "The northern fields are reserved for the spring lambing." "Then reserve somewhere else for lambing. These sheep will die if they stay here. And the sick ones, we separate them from the healthy animals and begin treatment. I will need bitter root and feverfew as much as you can source. Also willow bark and honey. The medicine needs to be administered twice daily, morning and evening, for at least 4 weeks. That is a lot of work for 200 sheep. Then we had better get started. They worked through the morning, Harrow calling in his assistant shepherds to help move the flock. The healthy animals were driven north to fresh pasture, while the sick ones were separated into a smaller pen near the barn where they could be monitored closely. By midday, Kendrick's back ached from hauling water buckets and wrestling stubborn sheep, and Orenna's dress was filthy with mud and worse. Lady Zerwell appeared briefly at noon, watching from a distance. She did not approach or speak, simply observed for several minutes before returning to the house. "She is watching me," Orenna muttered, shoving a reluctant ewe toward the treatment pen. "Of course she is," Kendrick said. "This is a test. She wants to see if you will fail. And if I do." "You will not." Orenna gave him a look but said nothing. They went back to work. By nightfall, the flock had been successfully moved, the sick animals separated, and Orenna had prepared the first batch of medicine from the herbs Harrow had sourced from the estate's still room. The decoction smelled vile, a mixture of bitter and astringent that made Kendrick's eyes water, but Orenna pronounced it acceptable. "We will begin dosing them tomorrow morning," she said, scrubbing her hands in a bucket of cold water. "In the meantime, we need to watch for animals that are too weak to take the medicine by mouth. Those will need to be hand-fed, possibly through a tube." "I do not know how to do that," Harrow admitted, his earlier hostility muted by exhaustion. "I will teach you." They trudged back to the house as the sun set, both too tired to speak. Mrs. Farraway had laid out a cold supper in the kitchen, and they ate standing up, too dirty and worn to sit at the formal dining table. Kendrick watched Orenna devour bread and cheese with single-minded focus, her green face drawn with fatigue. "You need to rest," he said. "I will rest when the sheep are improving. You will be no use to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion." She gave him a tired smile. "Look at you, sounding almost concerned." "I am concerned. You are taking on too much." "I have to. If I fail, we lose everything. Your mother made that clear." "She also gave us a month. You do not have to fix everything in one day." Orenna set down her cup. "I know. But I keep thinking about what happens if I am wrong. If this is not Meyer's sickness, or if it is Meyer's sickness but the treatment does not work. If those sheep die, your mother will blame me, and she will be right to do so. I will have failed. Or you will have done your best, and sometimes that is not enough. That is not failure. That is life. Easy for you to say. Your future does not hinge on a bunch of sick sheep." "My future hinges on you," Kendrick said quietly. "The sheep are important, but they are not the point." "You are the point." She looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. "I do not know how you can be so calm about all of this. Your mother hates me. Your inheritance is in jeopardy. We might lose everything, and you just keep going like none of it matters. It matters. But worrying will not change anything, so I focus on what I can control." "And what is that?" "Making sure you eat enough, making sure you rest, making sure you know that no matter what happens with the sheep, I am not going anywhere." Orenna's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back fiercely. "You are too stubborn for your own good. I learned from the best." She laughed, a short, watery sound, and leaned against him. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and they stood there in the kitchen, filthy and exhausted and holding on to each other like drowning swimmers. Mrs. Farraway found them like that a few minutes later. She clucked her tongue and shooed them toward the stairs. "Go on, both of you. Get some sleep. The sheep will still be there in the morning." "Thank you," Orenna said softly. The housekeeper's stern expression softened. "You are working hard, girl, that is plain to see. Maybe her ladyship will come around, maybe." They climbed the stairs together, stopping on the landing where their rooms diverged. Kendrick wanted to say something, to offer reassurance or comfort, but he could not find the right words. Instead, he squeezed her hand briefly and watched her disappear into the blue guest chamber. Then he went to his own room and fell into bed, asleep almost before his head hit the pillow. The days that followed settled into a grueling routine. They woke before dawn and spent the morning dosing the sick sheep, carefully pouring the bitter medicine down each animal's throat while Harrow and his assistants held them steady. By midday, they would check on the main flock in the northern pastures, looking for signs that the disease was spreading. Afternoons were spent preparing the next batch of medicine, monitoring the sickest animals, and trying to keep everyone's spirits up despite the slow progress. The first week passed with no visible improvement. 3 more sheep died, their bodies wasted to skin and bone. Orenna examined each carcass thoroughly, looking for signs that her diagnosis was correct, that the treatment was working but simply too late for the most advanced cases. Kendrick watched her work with clinical precision, her green face set in grim concentration, and marveled at her resilience. Lady Zerwell appeared every few days, observing from a distance. She never spoke to them, never offered criticism or praise. She simply watched, her face an unreadable mask, and then left. It was unnerving. "She is like a hawk," Orenna said one evening as they trudged back to the house. "Just circling, waiting for me to fail so she can swoop in." "My mother has always been patient," Kendrick said. "It is one of her more intimidating qualities. I would prefer it if she would just yell at me. At least then I would know what she is thinking. She is thinking that if you succeed, she will have to accept you, and that terrifies her. Why, I am not going to take you away from her. I do not want to separate you from your family. It is not about me. It is about control." Kendrick picked up a stick and tossed it into the underbrush. "My mother has managed this estate for 5 years. She has made every decision, handled every crisis, proven that she does not need a man to run things. And now I am back, and I am bringing a woman she did not choose, did not approve, did not even imagine. It undermines everything she has built. So I am a threat. You are a change." "My mother does not handle change well." Orenna was silent for a while, then she said, "What was your father like? Practical, fair. He loved the land, loved the work. He was not a warm man, but he was steady. You always knew where you stood with him. And your mother, sharper, more ambitious. She came from a merchant family, married up when she wed my father. I think she always felt she had something to prove. No wonder she hates me. She does not hate you. She fears you. There is a difference. Not much of one from where I am standing." By the end of the second week, the tide began to turn. One of the sick ewes, a young animal that had been at death's door, began to show signs of improvement. Her breathing eased, her appetite returned, and the sores on her skin started to heal. 2 days later, another sheep rallied. Then another. Orenna wept when she saw the improvement. She stood in the treatment pen, tears streaming down her green face, and Kendrick realized he had never seen her cry before. She had been frightened, angry, determined, but never this open, this vulnerable. "It is working," she said, her voice shaking. "It is actually working." Harrow stood nearby, his arms crossed, watching the ewes with cautious optimism. "Too early to celebrate," he said gruffly, "but it is a good sign. It is more than a good sign, it is proof." Orenna wiped her eyes. "If these sheep are improving, the others will too. We just have to keep up the treatment." "And the pastures?" Kendrick asked. "The contaminated fields? They need to be drained and left fallow. That is not negotiable. If the sheep go back there, they will just get sick again. I will talk to my mother about it." He found Lady Zerwell in the estate office, a cluttered room on the ground floor that smelled of leather and old paper. She sat behind the massive oak desk his father had commissioned, writing in a ledger with careful precision. She did not look up when he entered. "The sheep are improving," he said without preamble. His mother's pen paused, then continued. "I heard. Orenna was right. It is Meyer's sickness and the treatment is working. 1 or 2 animals improving does not constitute a cure. Half a dozen animals are showing improvement. The others will follow, perhaps." Kendrick crossed to the desk and planted his hands on the polished surface. "She saved your herd. The least you can do is acknowledge it." His mother set down her pen and looked up at him. Her eyes were tired. "Do you think this is easy for me? Watching my son throw his life away for something that should never have happened. Do you think I enjoy being the villain in your romantic story? You are not a villain, but you are wrong. Orenna is not going to destroy me. She's going to make my life better. Why can you not see that?" "Because I am old enough to know that love is not enough. Life grinds away at even the strongest affection. And when the love fades, what are you left with? A wife you cannot take to social gatherings, children who will be reviled by their peers, a legacy tainted by scandal. I am trying to save you from that. I do not want to be saved, I want to be happy." "Happiness is overrated," his mother said, but there was no heat in the words. She sounded exhausted. "Very well. If the sheep continue to improve, I will honor our agreement. But the estate still has problems beyond the herd. We are behind on timber contracts, 2 tenant families are in arrears on their rent, and the North Bridge needs repair before the spring floods. Curing a sick flock does not solve everything. I know, but it is a start." His mother picked up her pen again. "Go. You have work to do." He left the office and returned to the pastures where Orenna was preparing the evening dose of medicine. She looked up when he approached, her expression questioning. "My mother is considering," he said. "That is something, I suppose." "It is more than something. She is bending, give her time." Orenna went back to grinding herbs. "How much time?" "We have less than 2 weeks until your mother's deadline. Then we will make the most of those 2 weeks." Over the next 10 days, the transformation in the 6 sheep was remarkable. One by one they rallied, gaining weight and strength, their breathing easing, their eyes brightening. The sores healed, leaving only scars in the wool. By the end of the 3rd week, every animal that had survived the initial die-off was well on its way to recovery. Harrow, who had been skeptical at first, became one of Orenna's staunchest defenders. "I have been raising sheep all my life and I have never seen anything like this," he told Kendrick one afternoon. "That orc woman of yours has a gift. She saved this herd when everyone else, myself included, had given up. You should tell my mother that." "Already did." "Not sure it made a difference, but I said my piece." Kendrick found Orenna in the barn, checking on a ewe that had been the last to show improvement. She was sitting in the straw, the sheep's head in her lap, running her fingers through the wool. "She is going to be fine," Orenna said without looking up. "They are all going to be fine. You did it. We did it. I could not have managed this alone." Kendrick sat down beside her. "My mother has been watching. I know. I feel her eyes on me every day. She is impressed. She will not admit it, but she is. Impressed enough to accept me. I do not know, but we will find out soon." The deadline arrived on a cold, clear morning in late December. Kendrick woke to frost on his window and the sound of sheep bleating in the distance. He dressed carefully, aware that today might determine the course of his entire future. His mother was already in the dining room when he came down, sitting at the head of the table with a cup of tea cooling in front of her. She gestured at the chair beside her. "Sit." He sat. "Where is Orenna?" "I sent Mrs. Faraway to fetch her. She will be here shortly." They waited in silence. His mother looked older this morning, her face drawn, her silver hair pulled back so tightly it must have hurt. When Orenna finally entered, still in her work clothes and smelling faintly of sheep, his mother gestured for her to sit as well. "I understand the herd is recovering," Lady Zerwell said without preamble. "Yes, my lady," Orenna said. "We have not lost an animal in over a week. The survivors are gaining weight and strength. They should be ready to rejoin the main flock within the month. And the pastures, the contaminated fields need to remain fallow for at least a year. After that, they should be safe to use again. Harrow tells me you also identified issues with the water drainage that have been causing problems for years. He says your suggestions for improving the system will prevent future outbreaks. I hope so." His mother picked up her teacup, then set it down without drinking. "You have proven yourself competent. I cannot deny that. The herd would have been lost without your intervention." Orenna said nothing, waiting. "However," his mother continued, "competence alone does not make you suitable as a daughter-in-law. You are still an orc. The social consequences of this marriage have not changed." "Mother," Kendrick said, a warning in his voice. "Let me finish." Lady Zerwell looked at Orenna directly. "I have spent the past month watching you work. I have watched you rise before dawn and labor until well past dark. I have watched you handle stubborn animals and even more stubborn men with equal patience. I have watched you prove yourself in every way that matters. And I have realized something." She paused, and for the first time, Kendrick saw uncertainty in his mother's face. "I have realized that I have been afraid, not of you specifically, but of what you represent. Change, loss of control, the possibility that the world I understand is slipping away." His mother's voice softened. "My husband built this estate from wilderness. When he died, everyone expected me to fail. They expected me to sell the land, to remarry, to retreat into widowhood and obscurity. Instead, I kept this place running. I proved that a woman could manage what everyone assumed required a man. And I have been so focused on holding on to that achievement that I forgot something important." "What?" Orenna asked quietly. "That my son's happiness matters more than my pride." Lady Zerwell stood, moving to the window. "I still believe this marriage will be difficult. I still believe you will face prejudice and hardship, but I also believe that you are strong enough to weather it, both of you." Kendrick felt something tight in his chest loosen. "Does that mean you will sign the trust?" His mother turned to face them. "I will sign the trust on one condition. I remain in this house. This is my home. I built it, maintained it, and I will not be pushed aside simply because my son is finally ready to take responsibility for his inheritance." "I would never ask you to leave," Kendrick said. "Good." His mother returned to the table and sat down. "Then we have an agreement. The estate will pass to you and you will marry your orc woman. But understand this, both of you. I am not suddenly accepting of interspecies marriage. I am not going to embrace you with open arms, Orenna, or pretend that I do not have reservations. I am simply choosing to trust my son's judgment over my own prejudices. That is all I can offer." "That is enough," Orenna said. "I do not need you to love me. I just need you to give us a chance." "Then you have it." Lady Zerwell stood. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have paperwork to see to. The trust documents require witnesses and a notary, which means a trip to Millfield. We can leave this afternoon if the roads are passable." She left the dining room with her usual brisk efficiency. Kendrick and Orenna sat in stunned silence for a long moment. Then Orenna started laughing, a slightly hysterical sound. "Did that just happen?" she asked. "I think so. Your mother just gave us her blessing, sort of." "Sort of," Kendrick agreed. He reached across the table and took her hand. "Are you all right?" "I do not know. I feel like I should be more relieved, but mostly I just feel exhausted. The past month has been hard. The past 8 months have been hard." She squeezed his fingers. "When do you want to get married?" "Tomorrow, if possible." Your mother suggested spring, a wedding in the orchard. The orchard she forbade you to enter, the very same. I think it is her way of making amends, or at least acknowledging that she was wrong. Orenna smiled. Spring sounds nice, actually. It gives us time to prepare, to let people get used to the idea. And to finish putting the estate back in order. That too. They traveled to Millfield that afternoon. The three of them crowded into the estate carriage with Mrs. Fairaway as chaperone and witness. The notary was a pinched-faced man who looked askance at Orenna but kept his opinions to himself, which Kendrick considered a minor miracle. The trust documents were signed, witnessed, and sealed within an hour. On the ride back, his mother sat across from them, watching the winter landscape roll past the carriage windows. "You will need to hire more staff," she said abruptly. "Mrs. Fairaway cannot manage the house alone once you start a family." "We have not discussed children," Orenna said. "You will." "People always do." His mother glanced at her. "And when you do have children, they will be my grandchildren, green skin and all. I want that understood." Orenna blinked. "Yes, my lady." "Good." His mother returned her gaze to the window. "I may not be the warmest grandmother, but I will be a present one. That is something." The winter months passed in a blur of work and preparation. The sick sheep made a complete recovery, rejoining the main flock by mid-January. The contaminated pastures were drained and replanted with cover crops that would help cleanse the soil. Harrow implemented Orenna's suggestions for improving the water management, preventing the conditions that had allowed the parasites to flourish. Meanwhile, Orenna threw herself into learning the other aspects of estate management. She spent hours in the office with Lady Zerwell, reviewing ledgers and contracts, learning about timber sales and tenant agreements. To Kendrick's surprise, the two women developed a cautious working relationship. They were not friends exactly, but they treated each other with respect and even occasional warmth. "Your mother is terrifying," Orenna said one evening as they walked the estate boundaries together. "She knows every detail of every contract, every debt, every obligation. I feel like a child trying to keep up. She has had 5 years to master it all. Give yourself time." "I am trying, but every time I think I understand something, she points out 3 complications I never considered." Orenna sighed. How did she manage all of this alone? Determination. And fear of failure. I can relate to that. They made the rounds of the tenant farms, introducing Orenna to the families who worked Zerwell land. The reactions were mixed. Some were openly hostile, refusing to speak to her or acknowledge her presence. Others were cautiously polite, willing to reserve judgment. A few were genuinely welcoming, particularly the younger families who had less invested in the old prejudices. "This is going to be harder than I thought," Orenna admitted after a particularly tense visit to one of the older tenant families. "Did you think it would be easy?" "No, but I hoped people would at least be civil once they saw I was not going to eat their children or burn down their barns." "Give them time, they will come around. Some of them will, others never will." She looked at him seriously. "You know that, right? Some people will never accept me no matter what I do or how I prove myself." "I know, but they do not matter. They matter to you. These are your tenants, your neighbors, people you have known your entire life. I do not want to be the reason you lose those relationships." Kendrick stopped walking and turned to face her. "I did not fight for you, upend my life and challenge my mother just to worry about what the neighbors think. I love you. That is all that matters." She smiled, the expression transforming her face. "You never actually said that before, that you love me. I thought it was obvious." It was. "But it is nice to hear the words." He kissed her, right there on the road between 2 tenant farms where anyone might see. When they pulled apart, she was blushing, her green cheeks darkening. "That was not subtle," she said. "I am done being subtle." They planned the wedding for early April, when the orchard would be in full bloom. Lady Zerwell threw herself into the preparations with surprising enthusiasm, coordinating with Mrs. Faraway to organize a celebration that would be both respectable and grand enough to make a statement. Invitations were sent to neighboring estates, to Kendrick's few remaining relatives, to the tenant families and local merchants. Not everyone accepted. Several families declined with polite excuses. A few sent outright refusals, making their disapproval clear. But enough people accepted that the event would be well attended, which Kendrick considered a victory. "You are being very calm about this," Orenna observed one evening as they reviewed the guest list. "Half the county is declining your wedding invitation. They are showing their true colors." "I would rather know who my real friends are." I suppose that is one way to look at it. The week before the wedding, Orenna's sisters arrived from the Northern Territories. Kara, the eldest, was a stout woman with the same green skin and small tusks, her face kind and weathered from years of midwifery. Lyra, the younger, was taller and leaner, with the sharp eyes of a trader. They descended on the estate like a small, cheerful hurricane, bringing gifts and laughter and a flood of embarrassing stories about Orenna's childhood. Lady Zerwell tolerated their presence with stiff courtesy, though Kendrick caught her smiling once or twice at Kara's jokes. "Your mother is not as bad as you described," Kara told Orenna on the second day of their visit. "Cold, yes, but not cruel." "She is trying," Orenna admitted. "I think the wedding has given her something to focus on besides her disapproval." "Or she has realized that you are good for her son," Lyra suggested. "Either way, I call it progress." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and warm, the orchard exploding with white and pink blossoms. Mrs. Faraway had organized a small army of servants to set up chairs and tables, to prepare food and drink, to decorate the space with ribbons and flowers. By mid-morning, the estate looked like something from a fairy tale. Kendrick dressed in the formal clothes his mother had insisted upon, dark trousers and a tailored coat that felt too tight across the shoulders. He stood in the orchard with the minister, a pragmatic man from Millfield, who had agreed to perform the ceremony without comment on the bride's species, and waited. The guests arrived in clusters, filling the chairs that had been set up beneath the blooming trees. Harrow and his family sat in the front row. Several tenant families scattered throughout the audience. A few of his mother's friends from neighboring estates, their expressions carefully neutral. And in the back, almost hidden, a handful of orcs from the border territories, friends of Orenna's family who had made the long journey to witness the marriage. Then the music began. A simple melody played on a fiddle, and Orenna appeared at the far end of the orchard path. She wore a dress of deep blue, simple but elegant, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. Kara and Lyra walked on either side of her, and behind them came Lady Zerwell, her face composed and unreadable. Kendrick felt his breath catch. She was beautiful. Orenna walked the length of the orchard with steady steps, her eyes fixed on him. When she reached the front, Kara and Lyra stepped aside, and to Kendrick's surprise, his mother took Orenna's hand and placed it in his. "Take care of each other," Lady Zerwell said quietly. Then she took her seat in the front row, and the ceremony began. The minister spoke about love and commitment, about the challenges of building a life together, about the importance of trust and respect. Kendrick barely heard the words. He was too focused on Orenna, on the way her hand trembled slightly in his, on the tears shining in her eyes. When it came time for the vows, he spoke clearly. "I, Kendrick Zerwell, take you, Orenna Lorne, to be my wife." I promise to stand beside you in all things, to honor your strength and support your dreams, to build a life with you that is worth the struggle it took to get here." Orenna's voice shook when she replied, "I, Orenna Lorne, take you, Kendrick Zerwell, to be my husband. I promise to work beside you, to bring my best to our life together, to never give up on us even when things are hard. I love you. I choose you. Always." The minister pronounced them married, and Kendrick kissed his wife to the sound of scattered applause and a few audible gasps from the more conservative guests. He did not care. All that mattered was the woman in his arms, green-skinned and tusked and absolutely perfect. The celebration that followed was less formal than the ceremony. Tables laden with food and drink filled the orchard, and people mingled freely, the initial awkwardness easing as the wine flowed. Kendrick watched his mother circulate through the crowd, her posture regal, deflecting the occasional pointed comment with icy courtesy. "She is defending you," Kendrick told Orenna. "Did you see her shut down Lady Pemberton when she made that comment about appropriate matches?" "I saw." "I also saw her glare at the Miller family when they tried to leave early." Orenna laughed. "Your mother is terrifying when she wants to be. She is on our side now. That makes her even more formidable." As the afternoon wore on, the guests began to depart. The tenant families left first, then the neighboring gentry, offering polite congratulations that ranged from genuine to perfunctory. Orenna's sisters stayed until sunset, finally departing with promises to visit again soon and demands that Orenna write regularly. As the last carriage rolled down the drive, Lady Zerwell approached them. She had removed her formal shawl, and in the fading light she looked almost approachable. "That went as well as could be expected," she said. "Thank you," Orenna said, "for everything. For giving me a chance, for organizing this, for standing with us. I did not do it for you. I did it for my son." But his mother's voice lacked its usual coldness. "However, I will admit that you have exceeded my expectations. You work hard, you treat the tenants fairly, and you have proven yourself capable. That is more than I can say for most of the people who attended today." "I will keep trying to earn your respect," Orenna said. "You already have." Lady Zerwell glanced at Kendrick. "Take care of her. She has given up a great deal to be here." "I know." His mother nodded once, then turned and walked back to the house, her spine straight and her head high. Kendrick watched her go, feeling a complex mix of affection and exasperation and gratitude. "Your mother just paid me a compliment," Orenna said wonderingly. "I think that was as close as she gets to affection. Treasure it." They stood together in the orchard as the sun set, surrounded by the scent of apple blossoms and the distant sound of sheep bleating in the fields. Kendrick pulled Orenna close, resting his chin on top of her head. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Yes, terrified but happy." "Terrified of what?" "Of failing, of not being good enough, of waking up one day and realizing I do not belong here. You belong here. You proved that when you saved the herd. You proved it again when you learned the estate accounts in a matter of weeks. You prove it every day. And when I make mistakes, then we fix them together. That is what marriage is." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I love you, you know that. You mentioned it during the vows. I wanted to say it again, just in case you forgot." He kissed her, long and slow, there in the orchard his mother had once forbidden her to enter. When they finally pulled apart, the first stars were appearing overhead, and the house behind them glowed with lamplight. "Come on," Kendrick said, taking her hand. "Let us go home." They walked back to the house together, past the blooming trees and the scattered chairs and the remnants of the celebration. Mrs. Fairaway met them at the door, smiling her quiet smile, and ushered them inside. The house felt different now, warmer somehow, as though the walls themselves had accepted this change. Lady Zerwell was waiting in the sitting room, a glass of wine in her hand. She raised it slightly when they entered. "To new beginnings," she said. "May they be less contentious than the old ones." Kendrick and Orenna exchanged glances, then raised imaginary glasses in return. "To new beginnings," they echoed, and for the first time since he had brought Orenna to Zerwell Manor, Kendrick felt truly at peace. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be more challenges, more prejudice, more moments when they would have to prove themselves. But they would face it together, and that made all the difference. The spring turned to summer, and Orenna settled into her role as lady of the estate with surprising ease. She worked alongside Harrow and the other shepherds, managing the flocks with the same competence she had shown during the Meyer sickness outbreak. She met with tenants, mediating disputes and helping families navigate difficult seasons. She learned to keep the complex accounts that governed the estate's finances, working side by side with Lady Zerwell in the office. And slowly, grudgingly, the community began to accept her. It was not universal. There were still families who refused to acknowledge her, still merchants who would not deal with her directly. But there were also those who came to respect her work, ethic, and her fairness, who began to see past her green skin to the person beneath. Kendrick watched his wife grow into her role and felt a pride that had nothing to do with property or status. This was what he had believed in from the beginning, what he had been willing to sacrifice everything to achieve. A life built on love and partnership and mutual respect. One evening in late summer, as they sat together on the terrace watching the sun set over the fields, Orenna turned to him with a serious expression. "I have been thinking," she said. "About what?" "About children. About what your mother said that day in the carriage." Kendrick felt his heart speed up. And I think I want them. Someday, not immediately, but someday." She looked at him uncertainly. "Is that something you want too?" "Yes, very much." She relaxed against him. "Good, because I have been terrified to bring it up. I was not sure how you would feel about half-orc children. I would feel the same way I feel about you, grateful, lucky, completely in love. You are such a strange man sometimes," she said, but she was smiling. "I believe you have mentioned that before." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to deep blue. In the distance, they could hear the sheep settling for the night, the sound familiar and comforting. The estate stretched around them, 800 acres of land that was now theirs to manage, to protect, to pass on to the next generation. It was not the life Kendrick had imagined as a boy. It was better. That autumn, Orenna discovered she was pregnant. The news spread through the estate like wildfire, prompting reactions that ranged from genuine joy to barely concealed dismay. Lady Zerwell received the announcement with her usual composure, then surprised everyone by immediately beginning to knit baby clothes. "I knitted for Kendrick when I was carrying him," she explained to a bemused Orenna. "It is a family tradition. Does it matter that this baby will be half-orc? A grandchild is a grandchild." Lady Zerwell examined her stitches critically. "Though I will admit, I am curious about the logistics. Will the child have green skin? Tusks? How does orc heritage express itself? I have no idea. My sister's children are all fully orc, so I have nothing to compare to." "Well, we will find out soon enough." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Orenna chafed at the restrictions Lady Zerwell and Mrs. Faraway tried to impose. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she complained when they insisted she stop working the sheep pens. "Women have been doing physical labor while pregnant since the beginning of time." "Humor us," Kendrick said. "We worry." "You worry too much." But she did scale back her work, focusing on the estate accounts and tenant relations instead of the more physically demanding tasks. Kendrick found himself taking on more of the day-to-day management, working closely with Harrow and the other staff to keep everything running smoothly. In late spring, just as the orchard came into bloom again, Orenna went into labor. It was a long, difficult process that left Kendrick pacing the hallway outside their bedroom while Kara, who had arrived 2 weeks earlier in anticipation, attended to her sister. Lady Zerwell sat in the sitting room with rigid composure, pretending to read a book she never turned the pages of. When the baby finally arrived, Kendrick was summoned into the bedroom to find Orenna exhausted but beaming, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "It is a boy," she said. "Do you want to hold him?" Kendrick took his son with shaking hands. The baby was smaller than he expected, with a dusting of dark hair and skin that was a pale green, lighter than Orenna's but definitely not human. He had small, barely visible bumps on his gums where tusks might eventually grow, and when he opened his eyes, they were a deep, clear gray. "He is perfect," Kendrick whispered. "We need to name him. I was thinking Xander after your grandfather. Xander Zerwell. I like it." They presented the baby to Lady Zerwell later that day. She held her grandson with surprising tenderness, her expression soft in a way Kendrick rarely saw. "He has your eyes," she told Kendrick. Then to Orenna, "and your strength, I suspect. You did well." "Thank you," Orenna said. Over the following weeks, Lady Zerwell became a fixture in the nursery, holding Xander, singing to him in a reedy voice, offering advice on everything from feeding schedules to swaddling techniques. Kendrick watched his mother transform from stern matriarch to devoted grandmother, and felt something shift in his understanding of her. She had always been capable of love. She had simply hidden it behind layers of propriety and control. As Xander grew, it became clear that he had inherited traits from both parents. His skin remained that pale green, his features a blend of orcish and human. He was a healthy, happy child who delighted in the attention of his grandmother and the playful teasing of Mrs. Faraway. The community's reaction was mixed. Some people accepted the child without comment. Others whispered behind their hands about mongrel blood and unnatural unions. But most people, when confronted with an actual baby rather than an abstract concept, found their prejudices harder to maintain. "He is just so sweet," one of the tenant wives said, bouncing Xander on her hip during a visit. "Look at those little cheeks. Who could resist?" "Some people still can," Orenna said quietly to Kendrick later. "Did you see how the Pemberton family refused to even look at him at the festival? Some people are determined to be miserable. That is their choice." 2 years later, a second son arrived. They named him Garrett, and he had his mother's dark eyes and his father's human features, though his skin carried a faint green undertone. The two boys grew up running wild through the estate, learning about sheep and farming and the rhythms of the land. Lady Zerwell continued to knit, to advise, to manage the parts of the estate Kendrick and Orenna left to her. She was gentler now, more willing to show affection, though she never lost her sharp tongue or her exacting standards. "You have done well," she told Kendrick one evening as they sat together watching Orenna teach Xander how to check a sheep for parasites. "Better than I expected, if I am being honest. High praise from you, I am serious. You took a difficult situation and made it work. Your father would be proud." Kendrick looked at his mother in surprise. She never spoke of his father in such terms. "Do you really think so?" "I know so." He valued competence and determination over bloodlines and social standing. He would have liked Orenna. She paused. "I like Orenna. It took me longer than it should have, but I got there eventually. She knows. She appreciates everything you have done. I did it for you, for my grandchildren. But also, I will admit, for her. She has earned her place here." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the family they had built together. Kendrick thought about the dinner where his mother had called Orenna a creature, about the moment he had seated her at the head of the table in defiance. So much had changed since then. So much had grown and shifted and healed. Not everything was perfect. There were still people who disapproved, still moments of tension and prejudice. But they had built something strong enough to weather those storms. A family. A partnership. A life worth fighting for. "Thank you," Kendrick said quietly. "For what? For bending, for trying, for becoming the grandmother my children deserve." His mother's eyes grew bright. "Well, someone has to teach them proper table manners. You certainly are not going to do it." He laughed and she smiled, and in the orchard the children played, green-skinned and human and perfect in their own way. The estate thrived. The sheep grazed peacefully in clean pastures, and the Zerwell name carried on, different than it had been but no less strong for the change. Years passed, seasons turning one into the next. Xander and Garrett grew into capable young men, helping manage the estate and learning the skills they would need to carry it forward. A daughter arrived when Orenna was 35, a surprise late addition to the family. They named her Senna, and she had her mother's fierce determination and her father's steady calm. Lady Zerwell lived to see all three grandchildren grown, to watch them make their own choices and forge their own paths. She died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, and the entire county attended her funeral. She was remembered as a formidable woman who had managed an estate alone, who had defended her family against all challenges, and who had learned, late in life, that love mattered more than pride. Kendrick and Orenna continued to manage Zerwell Manor together, their partnership deepening with each passing year. They grew old side by side, watching their children build their own families, watching the community slowly become more accepting of mixed marriages and half-orc children. On their 25th wedding anniversary, they walked through the orchard together, just the two of them. The trees were in full bloom again, the air heavy with the scent of flowers. "You remember that dinner?" Orenna asked. "When your mother called me a creature, I remember. I was so frightened, I thought it was over before it began. I knew it was just beginning." Kendrick took her hand. "I knew that if I did not fight for you then, I would regret it for the rest of my life. You are a stubborn man, Kendrick Zerwell. I learned from the best." She laughed, and the sound carried through the orchard, joyful and free. They had faced so much together, overcome so many obstacles, and here they were, still standing, still loving, still building the life they had fought so hard to create. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, a new generation growing up on Zerwell land. The estate would pass to Xander eventually, with Garrett and Senna each receiving their own portions. The Zerwell name would continue, changed but enduring. And it all started with a simple choice, made in the face of prejudice and fear. To seat the woman he loved at the head of the table, where she belonged. To declare, without words, that she mattered more than tradition or approval or inherited wealth. It had been the right choice. Kendrick had never doubted it, not even in the hardest moments. And as he walked through the blooming orchard with his wife's hand in his, he knew with absolute certainty that he would make the same choice again, every single time. They returned to the house as the sun set, welcomed by the warm glow of lamplight and the sound of family gathering for dinner. The long oak table in the dining room was full now, crowded with children and grandchildren, with laughter and conversation, and the casual chaos of a family meal. Orenna took her place at the head of the table, and Kendrick sat beside her, and they shared a smile that held 25 years of love and struggle and triumph. Around them, the family they had built together ate and talked and laughed, and the house that had once felt so cold and judgmental now rang with warmth and life. This was home. This was family. This was everything they had fought for, everything that mattered, and it was enough, more than enough. It was everything.